Quick introduction. I am Pradeepto Bhattacharya. I live in Pune, in India. I have been contributing to open source for almost 10 years now to a project called SKD and some other projects. I've been doing CI/CD for 5 years almost. And then that's a very short introduction I want to give, and let's move on to the real stuff. So the talk is titled as Orchestrating Pipelines, Jenkins pipelines using Python and Jenkins API. Somebody had asked me some time back, around a month back, what do you mean by orchestrating? So I'll try and explain that over the period of the talk, but let's see the agenda first. So one of the most important things of doing anything is understanding why. It might be the best technology in the world, but if I don't understand why I need it, it doesn't really make sense. It could be really good, but I might just use something simpler or something different, or it might not fit my use case. So I'll delve some time on what kind of problems that me and some of my friends have solved by doing what I'm going to talk about. Then I'll briefly show you in the sense the commands to install them, which are basic, very simple commands. And I'll talk about the various modules. It's a Python library that we are going to talk about. So it comes with lots and lots of modules. And I will pretty much that, along with the code examples, we will delve into various ways that, the small building blocks of the whole API, and we will detail it out as we see. Then I'll talk about some part of the documentation that is there or that is not there in this particular library. And I think the talk should take enough time that we will have some time left over for question and answers. So, as I said, why? The motivation. So, most of us here, many of us rather, will be our Jenkins users, Jenkins admins. And one of the most common thing, the simplest thing that all of us do is to create a job and run it periodically or run it out of for some reason, some cause, and things like that. But when we do that, there are times, maybe you guys have come across that you need more fine-grained control over what you want to do. It's not just the job. It might be a series of jobs, things that can be defined or often termed as pipeline maybe. And maybe you are writing more fine-grained scripts to do that, and more Python scripts or Ruby scripts or whatever your language is. You're writing some scripts, and somewhere you feel that you wish you could talk to Jenkins. That's what the whole orchestrating is all about to me, and that's what I'm going to try to explain, and how successfully we have used it at various places. So it's about fine-grained control of your pipelines, more complicated pipelines, and since we have this, Jenkins comes with this REST API, some of you must have seen it. There is this groovy console, and you can actually access your job objects and your build objects and so on and so forth. I can quickly give you a very interesting case where not the Python per se, but the Groovy API came into a huge help for me. Some years back, I was working for a client, me and my team, and we, for whatever reasons, we had to deprecate or let go of many hundred jobs, literally hundreds of jobs. They were not needed for whatever reasons. And it was the easiest thing to do was to loop over something and just call delete. It's a very, very simple use case, and that's what it helped us with. So the Groovy API, there's this console inside the Jenkins web UI itself where you can do that. So we have, you can read more about the remote access API in those URLs, and if you just search, that's one of the things in the Jenkins wiki. I'll not delve into it in detail, but if you want to really understand the internals of the API, there's the XML API, JSON API, and this wrapper, Python wrapper, and so on and so forth. I'll talk about other libraries at the end of the talk as well, just to be fair to other libraries as well. Yeah. Now, as I said, we need to talk to Jenkins. There are times when we need to talk to various tools, our own tools, and that's the reason we have API. When I say talk, basically we would like to have conversations, or we have to say a story. Our program can be a story. If you think it in those terms, I sometimes think it in those terms. So, but before writing a story or before having a conversation, one of the most important things is to learn the words of the language. Using those words, you join them, you put in the grammatical constructs, and you have conversations with people or with whoever. So, with this API, we will see, I define them as the words. This is an analogous term that I am trying to make it so that I can explain it to you. So we have various small constructs to create jobs. You can always go new item and freestyle and put in a name and then configure the job. Yes, but you can create it using the API as well. You can invoke jobs, which is equivalent to doing a poll job or a build job or things like that. You can monitor your builds, you can monitor your jobs, you monitor your nodes, which you probably do it using the API, the console, or maybe some other way. Maybe I have seen somebody write a complete different dashboard using the API, of course, but a complete different dashboard. You can even create views with this, and you can do a lot more. You can search and manipulate artifacts if you want to, the build artifacts. But we'll see all of those. So, as I said, conversations is what we need to have with Jenkins, and that's my goal, and that's what I've been doing. So it could be one job running a script that needs to talk to another job. I have seen such a case in which there is this job which runs every day, or not every day, it actually runs per commit. And there is another job which needs to use this particular job and few more other jobs and pull in artifacts from those and do something with it. So your conversation could be one job, your script talking to one job or multiple jobs and getting your story done or your final objective done. Another use case that we have seen is maybe you have certain things happening, and based on those events, let's call them that, you take certain actions. Maybe you want to invoke a certain job, or maybe you want to invoke some other job, or something like that. These are the various things. After seeing the various small constructs that you will see, you will realize the power that you have, and then you can start writing your own stories. And these are the only two stories or two small, literally lines that I have seen, and I have seen myself and others using it very, very extensively and successfully in production. Yeah, this is a quick part. The installation is as easy. It's a Python API, so quick show of hands. How many of you do Python here? Wow, great. Then this is it's a no-brainer. You just have to install either using pip install, easy install. Sometimes for certain package, on a Ubuntu machine, you get this OS-specific packages. Sometimes those work. And this library has been tested with 2.6, 2.7, and 3.3, as far as I know. I must admit, and I would have said this at the end anyway, the library definitely needs more love. There are people who contribute to it, but it's like few merges, maybe 3-4 merges a month or something. When somebody sends in a pull request, it's not really actively developed, but it works really, really nicely. It could definitely have more features, but it is better than any other competition I have seen in Python, at least. Yeah, let's move to the code. So at this point, I'd like to apologize. I know that slides should be less text and whatnot, but I'm showing a lot of code. I have a VM. If you come up to me later and I can show you everything that is being there is basically a copy-paste from my terminal. So I can show you everything and maybe more if you have some questions. But what you will see after henceforth, pretty much most of the slides are code pastes and the output of those. So basically, I've been writing the code in REPL, Python REPL, and pasting the results here. I've been experimenting some things, and some of the things I will talk about it and things like that. So I apologize for actually not doing a demo. Yeah. So first of all, the modules. There are a bunch of modules. I've just highlighted a few of them. There is obviously the Jenkins instance, which abstracts the whole Jenkins instance itself. It encapsulates it. So if you have a Jenkins instance running, that is the first object you create and then start talking to it. That's the first hello, you can call it. Then comes the jobs. So I have put it in parentheses. There is a class job and there is a module called job, and there's jobs as well. The jobs one is basically a generator object which gives you all the jobs. But the job class itself is basically the one that encapsulates any job that you create using the UI or however you create it. That's the job thing. Then obviously every job has multiple builds. When you keep running it, there's this class which encapsulates builds. Artifacts, the build artifacts, you can actually find out the artifacts and whatnot. So this particular class does that. And node and so many other things. There is this user API which I did not talk about. But it basically is a higher level convenience API so that you don't have to do a bunch of small operations, if you may call it. From my experience, what I have seen is I like to stay with the other classes and do my things in small low-level chunks, and then make a nice code out of it. But there are times when you can just write one-line method, but you need to pass in more stuff. So since you don't have the Jenkins object in that case, you will see it later in the code. You have to pass the Jenkins URL, you have to pass the job name, and so forth. So sometimes I don't prefer it. Mostly in all my experience that I have done with this, I've always used the rest of them. But it's a good API. No, I don't want to take anything away from it. Yeah, connecting. Can everybody read this font? I'm sorry. Can everybody read at the back even? Okay, cool. I got a thumbs up from somewhere back out there. So to connect to the Jenkins instance, all you need to do is import the Jenkins class and create a nice, just give it the URL. Now, when you create a URL, you get a nice Jenkins object, and you can actually introspect it to find more about it. The interesting thing that you may think about immediately is, can it support auth? Yes, it can. So the next two parameters can be passing basically the username password. Obviously, if you are putting it in code, I would recommend it to put it in environment variable, fetch it using os.environment or something like that, and pass it on to this class. Once you have this object, you can start doing whatever you want, as we will see. This is another thing that is kind of a coding practice between me and people with whom I work. So we create these helper functions and organize them in util libraries or things like that. So once I use that, I don't have to, if I need it somewhere else, I can just call the method once and be done with it. And maybe we can improve this even better later on. So the job class. Once you have the Jenkins object, it gives you this method called as keys, which basically gives you a list of all the job names, a string list of job names. You can use it to do further go and find job, but somehow I like to use the generator object, and you will see another method in the next slide. That's what I like to use it this way, because I straight away get the object. I have to do 2 or 3 things if I go by the first way. Anyway, you can use this method get jobs and iterate over your jobs, introspect your jobs, read their config if you want to, and things like that. Yeah, I mean, you can even create a job, and I will show you later, when I'll talk about it in a few slides down, you can actually change certain parts of your job as well. So if I know my job, this is a very simplistic explanation out here or example out here, but if you know the name of your job, you can just do this. And once you have, as I said, you can start introspecting. You can find if the job is enabled, if the job is running, if the job is disabled, and things like that. This will come into, just remember this enabled thing. Soon we will see something very interesting in a bit. I don't know if I put that on the slide, but I'll talk about it in a bit. So you can do, as I said, I will go through various the small words that I'm trying to take care of. Then once you get a job, you can find the last good build, last stable build, last just the build, or last bad build even. Once you have those, you can use these numbers in your other sections of your pipeline to find, for example, if you want to create a release version of certain daily pipeline, so and your daily pipeline or rather a pipeline that runs for every commit. So there will be commits that will fail, and the developer will go back and commit more code and maybe fix it. So you will have these build failures in some of the builds. So you can always check for the best build or the last known good build or things like that, and take the artifact from that and do something with it. So those are the methods that actually give you the last stable build and last failed build and completed build number even if you want to. You can even get the build object, but for that you don't need to put the number. You just say last stable build. Yep, this is one of my interesting, I really like this a bit because I mean you can query a lot of information, but you need to do some actions sometimes. And I really like this because I can trigger job which I want and when I want. As I said, based on certain events, we can trigger off some jobs. Invoke. So when we call invoke, note there is an asterisk out there because I'm going to talk about it in 2 or 3 slides now. There is a reason behind that. So when we invoke a job, it immediately exits. This method immediately, it starts. If I wish I could have shown you a demo, as I said I can. Just come up to me after the talk. If you invoke the job, it will immediately exit, but you will see on your Jenkins console that the job starts trigger. The job is triggered in a second. The job is pending and it gets triggered. If there are executors that are free, the job will start running immediately. Immediately you can check if the job is running, and yes, it is running. So I just waited when I was doing this. I waited for a bit, and when the job got over, I tried it and it was false. The thing is, you might ask, there are jobs for which I need build parameters, and otherwise the job will fail because you need those parameters. Yes, it works with parameters as well. All you have to do is, so in my VM, I have a separate job for parameter just for these examples. That took a string example and a Boolean example. So I can pass it exactly like this. I can create a hash or a dict in Python actually, and I can pass it to the invoke method. When I do that, it does the same thing, and it will exit immediately, obviously, and the job starts running. You can actually query even, and you can find, and if you go and see the build parameters for that particular build, you will see everything is set as you have set. That's interesting. Here's one of the things that I can't even show even if I paste the code. What if you have a condition wherein you want a job to run and finish only then you want to do something? So you want a job that will block until certain time. There is a parameter that, just like build params, you can also pass block. If you say block equal to true, which is false by default, this method does not exit. It keeps on waiting until the job is over, and only then it exits. So use with care, but yes, you can do that. That's what I wanted to talk about. That's why I wanted to talk about invoke in a little bit, because it does a bunch of stuff, but unfortunately, this method is still documented, but you will find, as I said, I'll talk about the documentation throughout the talk. There are many places you will not find many of the classes, many of the methods are not documented. The only way is to go and see the library. It's open source. You go and see it, you see the methods. Maybe it has some doc strings. Sometimes it doesn't, so you have to read the code and actually understand how it works. A bunch of time I had to do that while playing with this library or while working with this library. You can disable a job, you can enable a job. It's as simple as clicking there. You just call a method. Yes, and you will get an exception if you try to invoke a job that is disabled. So you'll get a nice Java exception. Yeah, It's weird because it throws up like a really huge, weird Java-like exception because it talks to that library and whatnot. But yeah, you will get an exception if the job is not enabled. So you enable it and only then you start it. There are times when you need to figure out what is the SCM, what kind of source control management you are using. You can very easily do that just by the simple methods. I did not show it because another thing, well, I could have shown that as well, but I'll talk about it. There is this method called as modify CM, a branch. You can technically change the branch. So you can check for a branch and maybe the configuration is not set correctly, or maybe the configuration needs to change for this particular run of the build. Run of the job, so this particular build should run on a particular branch. Maybe you have a use case like that. You can actually call a method called as jobs method called as modify SCM branch, and you can change the job, the branch. That's amazing actually, and then you can start doing whatever you want to, maybe trigger up the job afterwards. As I said, you can actually query the whole config. In fact, if you create a XML config, a sample XML config, you can post it and using the API, and you can create jobs even. So we have been talking about job. The natural progression is the build. Similarly, you can find build information if you have the build number. Maybe you have the build ID. Or you found by doing the get last build number or things like that. Or you can just do build, and you get the build object. Then you can check if it is running, and if it is, you can actually find the SHA or whatever revision, whatever SCM you are using, you can find the right SHA for that or right revision number for it, and then maybe check if this is the right one, right build, right SHA, right artifact. You can compare those based on whatever your use case is again. And you can also check the status of the build. Is it success? Is it fail? And things like that. I think I have a fail somewhere. I can't remember. This is interesting. So this is what I wanted to show as well. The error out there is on purpose. This is a stack trace I got. So what happened is I invoked a job, and then I tried to fetch the build. I knew that it was 77 by looking at the Jenkins console, and immediately I got a stack trace. The reason for this is you have to recall this job object, where otherwise what happens is somehow it is not updated. Only then you get the latest build number. So when you have created the job object initially by running the same method as that, Jenkins get job, it did not know about the build number 77. The build number 77 only happened after you called the invoke method. So you have to redo the call that method again, and then you can check if it is running or not, or else it will give you a stack the error. Maybe you can handle that and then call it in your code and things like that in an exception handler. Yeah, we have all seen console log, and we rely on it to understand if our job has gone wrong or what has gone wrong. So you can actually fetch the whole console log. Sorry. So I always wondered what would be the use case for this, and if anybody will ever have this use case. And I actually kind of thought it was funny. But fun fact, when I was giving this talk at the JUC London, after the talk, one guy came up to me and said, guess what? We have this use case and we do this. I was very surprised because this is a small test job. I have seen jobs, and I'm sure you all have seen jobs where the log runs into much huge logs that you might have, sometimes even in KBs or MBs even, actually. If you have chef running inside your job or packer running in your job or things like that. So, but people have different use cases, and this is a great method apparently. So yeah, I never had the use case for this, but yeah. Artifacts. Any build that you do, any build complex enough will probably have some artifact. Maybe it builds an Amazon AMI, maybe it builds an RPM, maybe it builds a Debian package, maybe it builds a Python package, I don't know, something. Maybe it just creates a text file for a text file which has information about your AMI or the last commit information or something, right? That's your artifact. we can query those, and from pipelines we can see, that's what I said. Maybe this pipeline, pipeline B can talk to pipeline A and find out the last good build, read its artifact, find the RPM, maybe find the artifact, and then use it in this particular, in B job. It's as easy as that. Get the build, get the artifact, and then you get a dict, and you can actually iterate through the dict, and you can even read it. So get data, you can actually, it's a text file. In my case, it was a simple text file, so it was this. But if it had been a binary data, it would have printed some gibberish. But yeah, I'm trying to give you the idea what all you could do with it. You could save it to a different place. You could copy over, since you have the path and whatnot, you can copy it over, you can save it to a certain location. So there, I haven't shown those methods again because I can't really, it's an unfortunate thing, it's not a demo. But there are methods in this artifact class which are save and save to, so you can actually give it a location where you want to save it to. Yeah, pretty cool actually. You can find the artifact URL and things like that. Yeah, I have part of it. You can actually dig into the artifact information, the name of the file name maybe, or the URL and things like that. Once you have those, you can use this somewhere else, as I said. One of the most interesting thing would be to copy over them to a certain location and things like that, which is what we have done quite extensively. Yep, the user API, the convenience API. This is, as I said, it's a nice to have thing. So you will see that I have imported pretty much everything. I will not recommend anybody doing, in a Pythonic way to do an import star. Rather just import whatever you want at that point of time. But for the sake of example, I can just do get latest build and I'll get the build, but I have to pass in so much of extra information. See, I have to pass the Jenkins URL because I have not created the Jenkins object. I have to pass the name of the job because I've not created a job object and things like that, but I can always use that. I can use completed build similarly. I can actually find artifacts, but it's not that bad. As I said, there are some very nice methods, especially to do artifacts. Sometimes you might just want to just dig into artifacts for a particular job. So there is a beautiful method called search artifact by regex. So if you create a regular expression for a certain artifact, so in this case it would be artifact.text, so it would be artifact/.txt. If you do that and pass it to that method, it will actually give you the things, and you can actually even search for more. You can give it a list of artifacts and it can search through it, and it can give you the artifact objects at the end of it. So there are a bunch of helper methods, and this API is more or less documented. So you should definitely look at this API if you are looking for small, quick scripts and whatnot to talk to your Jenkins. Node. Any Jenkins installation worth its salt probably is more than single master. You're probably not using the executors of the masters. You have a bunch of nodes as slaves, Jenkins slaves, or Jenkins followers, if you want to call it that. So you have various types of nodes, maybe Android node, I don't know, that builds your Android application, maybe an RPM build slave, maybe, or things like that. So yeah, you can actually, this node class encapsulates the nodes, and very simple API. Again, it gives you a nice method which you can iterate through and find the nodes. You can actually enable a node or go make it offline even if you want to. Again, this is something not demoable on a slide. So yeah, you can check if it's online and take some action maybe, and maybe not route the job there if you want to. Set the configuration if you are setting it to a certain job and things like that. But yeah, you can query nodes. It's as simple as that. There's not much to do it, and I don't think this class is documented well, to be honest. But frankly, I haven't had the opportunity to use this class much, but it can do. I have seen it, I've tested it, while playing with it, not in production, but it works wonderfully actually. Plugins, yeah. What's Jenkins? I mean, Kosuke just spoke about so much about plugins. I mean, he wrote the first 10, and now there are 1,000 plus plugins. Yeah, and frankly, I'm pretty sure when you install your brand new shiny Jenkins, you get some plugins for free, and then you install countless more. I mean, without plugins, I wonder if we can go beyond a certain limit. So you can actually query, introspect the plugins, you can find the plugin versions. Again, this is a use case that I have not come across, but you can do all those things. I'm just putting everything on the plate to give you an idea what all things you can do. It's like I'm giving you lots of tools, and you know what you want to do with it. So you can actually just get the plugin objects, and from those you can find the versions, and you can find the paths and things like that. Or you could just find just the name of the text and check. Maybe it's something, I'm just thought. What if you want to do a certain action only if a certain plugin is installed? There are times when you need such a case. I mean, you need to do, and if you can abort the job saying that this plugin is not installed if it is not there in the list, maybe that's a nice use case you might come across someday. Yep. Exceptions. Any good Python library, being Pythonic, is supposed to use exceptions and handle exceptions. Jenkins Python API is no exception, pun intended. It has quite a few exceptions. I'm listing a few. So highly recommend that you catch them. Maybe a job is not configured for the SCM, or a build doesn't exist, or an unknown job, or things like that. Maybe there is an API exception. Never faced that. But yeah, you handle those and act accordingly. So the exception class is quite nice, and you have to, unfortunately, again, this class is definitely not documented. And so you have to actually go and see the exceptions.py and actually see what all exceptions are there, and maybe read some other part of the code and things like that. Yeah, but definitely use that. I think we have been saved lots of time by using exceptions correctly in Python. Yeah, documentation. As I said, this is a great way to contribute. Frankly, I see this as an opportunity, a wonderful opportunity to contribute to the Jenkins ecosystem and open source in general. The documentation is basically, if you go to that GitHub URL, you will find it's a bunch of code, and then there is this doc directory. The methods themselves don't have, some of the methods have wonderful doc strings and whatnot, but not most of them, only some of them. So you can actually start reading them, send them a patch or something. The documentation itself is, as I said, I think only 3 or 4 classes are documented, build, and I wonder if job is even documented. Build definitely is, artifact is, user API is. So yeah, you can actually contribute to that. In the same place, you will find a bunch of examples. There are like maybe 10 examples, very basic examples, which will kind of cover the kind of things that I have already told you. I have seen that those examples are a good starting point. After beyond that, I think for production scripts, me and my friends with whom I've worked for a long time, they have gone beyond that and used it much extensively, because there is no other way out, frankly, other than reading the code in that particular API. Yeah, I said that there are other libraries also which I would like to talk about. So there is this another Python Jenkins library, which is even, which probably, I don't know how well it is documented, but the coverage of API that it does is, in my opinion, much less than the one that I was talking about. So I tried to use it once, but I did not really like it. Recently, I found that, I found it recently, it's not new. The Ruby client, if you are a Ruby person, you should use that. And I think it has excellent coverage. When I have been experimenting, I found that one thing that I cannot do with the Python API is find the build params. For a job, I can find what the build params is, but I cannot, from the build object, I cannot find for a particular build what are the build params. That is unimaginable almost at times, because there are so many times when you have to run when you have to trigger a job, and once it is complete, and if it fails or something, or maybe you are just double checking, you go and check if you pass the right params. This is something that probably, if I am doing anything to with Jenkins and CI, I do it every day. every day. And that is kind of missing in the library that I spoke about, but I know that the Ruby library actually covers that. I mean, this is like a small nitpick, but I'm just telling you what all it does, and it does much more. So it's a quite good, it has a great coverage as well. Thank you all.